Tsukihime is a visual novel released in the year 2000 that follows a guy named Tonoshiki, colloquially also known as our boy. Shiki is a special lad in that he can see death. Literal death. Like, these lines appear in his vision, and if he cuts them, splish splash, chairs become mash. Little ways into the story, he meets a vampire named Arcoade and decides to really eye her over. Do you get it? It's really funny. Thing is, she lives. Don't question it. And from then on, our boy and Ark form a tenuous relationship in order to defeat this other vampire named Roa. It's like Twilight for weeaboos. It's totally sick. The populace of chronically online Japanese otaku agreed too, because for an indie work released again in the year 2000 with nothing but word of mouth to spread it, it sold pretty well. You should definitely skim its wiki page sometime, or read the manga, or maybe watch more of the video you're watching right now for more information. You could also just read the VN if you're interested. Something maybe 2 of you will do by the time this video ends and your interest peaked, but still good to bring up. Read suki.me for more info. Come on, this is where that gremlin Neko arc comes from. I know you want to check it out. Is that still popular with the youth, or was that 2 years ago? Oh god, time flies. I know this sounds like a weird thing to open with, given that Melty Blood is a Tsukihime spinoff, and, you know, most of my audience has read it over and over again to a worrying degree, but see, a large portion of the community actually surrounding this game either doesn't want to read, or literally doesn't know about the existence of Tsukihime. A lot of people play these games for the gameplay, actually. Yeah, I don't get it either. Nevertheless, it's because of that I felt prudent to open with the whole wiki spiel. Part of the how and why for understanding Melty Blood is knowing where it came from, after all. It is, for all intents and purposes, a sequel. Starting here plot-wise is like starting the Lord of the Rings trilogy with the Two Towers. Sure, it's more immediately interesting and a lot of cool stuff happens, but you're not gonna have context for why that cool stuff's happening. I don't know about you, but personally I find it hard to appreciate something when I'm constantly asking why like a cracked out 2-year-old. Melty Blood is an egregious without context too. Characters and concepts are brought up almost gratuitously with the idea that the audience already knows them, because, well, at the time of the release, most people who bought it would've. So in lieu of that, I'm gonna provide that context throughout this video. I'm not gonna tell you to go read the VN like a pretentious nitwit, or even play the original Melty for that matter. You don't need to read any of this hullabaloo to understand this behemoth of a video. It is made with the intention of everyone being able to watch it. Something, as an aside, I can't believe I've taken this long to explicitly do. Now, I'm not gonna sit here and summarize the totality of Tsukihime. You could still totally go read it after this video unspoiled or watch my old videos about it. You know, if you don't mind the slightly lesser quality and avant-gardeness of it all sometimes. Link up top to those, one of these directions. I'd at least recommend checking out the Hisui and Kohaku one. It's pretty cool. My intention with this project that you're currently watching / listening to as you work on something or go to sleep is to explain concepts as needed in order to provide clarity for and analyze Melty Blood. A course in Meltyology, if you will. Sit down, you might learn a thing or 3, BB. Melty Blood started development likely sometime in mid-2001. I say likely because on October 8th of that year, it was announced to the public via this event called the Tsukihime Matsuri Hime Hajime, a convention for artists of all kinds hosting purely Tsukihime-related material. Music, doujins, probably even that one shoot-'em-up fan game. Probably is the operative word for all of this though, because there's very little to go on about what else actually happened outside of, you know, Melty Blood's announcement. The only thing I can find online is this little blurb that, for some reason, is repeated word for word on multiple sites. It's likely, being that it was the early 2000s and Type Moon hadn't blown up beyond the indie sphere yet, that it was just a low-key affair with few eyewitness accounts. But it's safe to assume this event did happen for reasons I'll get into in a bit. Regardless, a convention centered around Tsukihime sounds like a wonderful time, and the announcement of Melty Blood was surely the odd-shaped cherry on top of it all. My calling it odd might seem strange with 22 years of hindsight, but let's really kick it back to late 2001. I was like 6 months old at the time. Type Moon, known only at this point for Tsukihime and the barely functional Kagetsu Toya, was teaming up with French Bread to make a full-fledged fighting game. FB is known today primarily for their fighters, but back then, they weren't even French Bread. Well, it was still called that, but FB consisted primarily of just Watanabe Seisakujo until well after Melty's development. And he was known at the time for his work on parody games. Basically, think of those old Mario or Sonic Flash games from the mid-2000s and replace Mario and Sonic with characters from Leaf and Air. Back to Melty Blood though, it was an ambitious little project too. It promised better sprite animation than the likes of Street Fighter 3, gripping gameplay that would innovate from its stale contemporaries, as well as a full-length VN-worthy story to boot. You know, not to mention immaculate art assets and a soundtrack that honestly could carry the game all on its own. I'm not talking after the fact with any of this stuff either. This is how the game was marketed in late 2001, well over a year before the final release. Given all this hype and build-up, I can't overstate enough that Melty Blood should have turned out like 90% of Kickstarter games. They shot for the moon with this one, pun intended, but somehow, despite the massive workload they subjected themselves to, the two teams were insanely efficient. The division of labor was thus: Type Moon would work on the scenario and artwork, while French Bread tackled the gameplay and converted the art to sprite animation. Third parties like Ryoto were brought in to help with the OST as well, but they're less relevant to the conversation for now. You're insane if you think I'm not going to go off about the music at some point in this video. Back to the timeline, after that grandiose announcement with all the proverbial stretch goals laid out, info on the development goes kinda dark. Of the interviews Type Moon did in the early aughts, at least of the ones we have translated, there's a couple-year gap of silence where, coincidentally, Melty Blood was entirely developed and released to the public. Okay, so hey, this is Editing Sleepy, and I'm realizing now that this is kind of not true, because there are some interviews that Type Moon did from around the mid-2000 to late 2002, around the time Melty Blood would have been in development, right? However, this interview right here talks about the formation of Type Moon and focuses on Tsukihime. Melty Blood is not mentioned once. I have all of these open, just reading them. This one is right here, and this is talking about just another project entirely. This one is actually substantial, because this one actually does mention Melty Blood. The only thing we learn about it right here is that Melty Blood was meant to be distributed in the summer, but as we know, it obviously came out in the winter months, so it got pushed back. It got delayed for quality assurance. Isn't that beautiful? Type Moon delaying shit for quality assurance? That would never happen again. I just wanted to get all my bases set, because saying that of all the interviews Type Moon did, none of them came out around this era, it's just a dead weight place, is fragrantly untrue. It is bad video making, and I would be cursed, I would be amiss if I did not correct that here. So thank you for listening. The rest of the video is still valid, 100% accurate and true, so there you go. And by some act of demonic providence, of all the snapshots the Wayback Machine has of Type Moon's website, the years where Melty would have likely been front and center are just gone. Wisp in the wind. However, that's not to say nothing was put out to the public during this time. The French Moon duo were very, very adamant people buy this thing. And the way they did that was letting their work speak for itself. Between late 2001 and late 2002, they shoved free samples into just about everything. Over the course of different stages of development, 4 demos were created and released publicly. You can actually still play most of these for yourself. They're pretty jarring, to say the least. I can't exactly put it into words, but it just feels jank. Characters move like trucks, there's no music, and sound effects are noticeably limited. That's to be expected, of course. Some of these are basically beta and prototype builds, but still, it's interesting to note just how far they came from these early demos to the final release, while still being the same game at its core. It's so close to playing like the final version, and that adds to the weirdness of it all. Seriously, in the demo I'm playing here, it feels like 0.75 speed, and CL is just busted and can infinitely spam her black key throws with no diminishing returns. It's kinda cathartic considering her route actually, but that's semantics no one will get but the real Tsukihimers. It goes without saying, but the 2002 final release of Melty Blood plays so much better it's crazy. Let alone Melty Blood React, the 2004 re-release I brought up briefly earlier, which itself feels like an entirely different series in comparison to these demos. If you got into the series with Actress again or even type Lumina, I think you should go and play these. Actually insane how far the series has come gameplay-wise, yet has always stayed the same at its core. I don't know how to data mine, or I'd look to see if anything else was on these things. They are fascinating little nuggets of history. If you want to get your hands on the demos for yourself, it's as simple as typing them into the search engine of your choosing. However, if you're not in the downloading mood, physical copies also aren't that hard to find. And they're not super expensive either. I said they gave free samples everywhere, and that's no exaggeration. Over the years, I've collected multiple of them by proxy of being mildly into buying the odd piece of Tsukihime merch here and there. These 2 books on screen right now came with demos, the Tsukihime Plus disc has one, and of course, as stated earlier, the digital-only ones have been archived. As for the differences between these demos, the first supposedly only contained Arcuate and CL and released the same day Melty was announced, October 8th, 2001. At least maybe? As I was editing, I went back through my sources for everything and ended up finding this Type Moon timeline of events, which goes back to 1995 and to the current day, and details pretty much everything they've ever released to like the nth degree. And the strange thing about this is, this says that Melty Blood Trial Edition 1 released in August of 2002, whereas the other blurb I read on like Wikipedia and other such sources cited the Tsukihime Matsuri Hime Hajime event, which happened in October of 2001. It cited that as the release of the initial trial edition. That is a 10-month discrepancy. 10 f***ing months. So I did some digging and I came to the conclusion that the results are inconclusive, but I have a good feeling I know what happened here. On this timeline, where everything else is backed up with other sources, most of which are official, for October of 2001, it just has nothing. That time that the Tsukihime Matsuri Hime Hajime was said to have been happening, just f***ing nothing. Dead water, right? However, if we go to October of 2002, this does make sense for an October release because that's when Trial Edition 2 was released. If you notice, it's in October. It's about a year discrepancy, but some of those older sources might have got confused and said, oh, this was the initial release for the Melty Blood Trial Edition, when in reality, that might have not been the case. I think this is a rational explanation, and, you know, the other source does come from Wikipedia and just is an uncited claim that has just been perpetuated throughout the internet, and I'm putting this in here because I don't want to just be perpetuating stuff again. I want you to take what I say regarding this whole release date chicanery with a grain of salt, because personally, looking back on this now, despite some of the stuff you're about to hear me say in the video, it makes a lot more sense for the initial trial edition to be released in in August rather than fucking October of 2001. You know, they might have announced it in October, but they weren't, well, more than likely weren't, handing out discs for people to play and be like, ooh, yeah, great. But everything else still stands other than the release date chicanery. I get to a part later in the video where I say, could you imagine this? An edition of Melty Blood released a year before its finalization. Just replace me saying a year with a few months and it still applies, because game development is fucking wacky sometimes, alright? So, everything else I stand by, but this one little fragment, I just don't want to be perpetuating misinformation again. Hi, I didn't expect to be sitting here in the editing bay fucking correcting stuff this soon, but them's the breaks sometimes. I'm trying to release a well-researched project, and this is the nature of it sometimes, so sorry for interrupting again. Back to the video. Remember, some stuff's not gonna mix up, but it's fine, because it's not enough for me to go back and justify rewriting and re-recording, and at this point, re-editing a lot of it, so sorry about that. Okay, back to it. And that's why I said earlier, we know that the Tsukihime Matsuri Hime Hajime event definitely happened, because this demo exists. It is physical proof that event happened, despite us not having proof anywhere else. The second demo released on June 6th, 2002 and added Akiha to the mix. This was released as a standalone at the Summer Kamikut of that year, and is slightly more difficult to find, but it is thankfully archived. Finally, the third was released fairly close to the release date digitally in late 2002, and served more as what you'd commonly think of as a demo, as opposed to a beta release to keep the hype going. If you're the attentive sort, you'll notice my words don't line up with what I said earlier. I said 4 demos, and we've only talked about 3. That's because of Trial Edition 1.2. No one knows when Trial Edition 1.2 exactly came out, or if it was a patch for the initial version released later online, but 1.2 is the one that came with these books I got, and is the one I'm most familiar with by extension. It's similar to the 1.0 version in that only Arcuate and CL are playable, but it's unknown what it changed from 1.0. Be it tweaks to the gameplay, adding in a few sound effects, or anything else is all guesswork on the part of the Tsukihime community. You see, that first edition, dubbed Trial Edition 1, is lost media. Unless you're rich, because whoever bought the one copy put up online is hoarding the fuck out of it. Makes me kinda sad. Version 1.2 still contains all that jank I talked about. It is the basis of the pseudo-gameplay analysis I did earlier. I can't imagine what a Melty Blood demo would play like from literally over a year before its final release. Really think about that. That is an insanely early build for a game. I know this is a weird point of comparison, but in recent years, beta versions of Sonic the Hedgehog 3 came out from just a few months before its final release. And here's a comparison from beta to final. That's a difference, again, of a few months. Could you imagine a year? Not to get hopes up in case this thing ever does get released, but at the time of its making, Sion's design would have looked like this. In my mind's eye, I'm fairly confident it was just a less refined version of Trial Edition 1.2, but it's still fascinating to think about, isn't it? And it's infuriating to think that we'll probably never see it. Not because it's lost the time, but because someone gets off on hoarding it. I don't know, maybe there's still hope of finding it one day. I'm not exactly super hard-pressed over this, but it's still irksome. It's still pretty lame, isn't it? Like, similarly to the Tsukihime prototype, which I've talked about in another video, linked somewhere around here, it sounds really cool. And that we'll never get to see it and see the differences between it and the final version when they could have been drastically different works, and in the case of like the Tsukihime prototype, we know they're drastically different works. It's just, you feel like you've lost something, right? Or is it just me? Am I the only one who's not hard-pressed, but actually secretly is hard? English is so hard. At the very least, I'm glad all the other demos have been preserved, because even what we got there is still pretty cool. I love looking back at this kind of thing, if you can't tell. Seeing a game from inception to its final form is just, Ooh. Get your gears turning. Okay, that does it for this little section though. I wish there was more to talk about, but what can you do? Melty Blood would release in late 2002 with about a dozen mile-high promises waiting to be fulfilled. Once it dropped, the rest was history. Type bread shot for the moon. And honestly, I think they hit the mark right on the dot. Okay, y'all, it's time to get down to brass tacks and really dig into this game. I've thought about the best way to go about this, given that my usual way of analyzing things right out the gate doesn't work with Melty Blood's route structure. And there's a few ways to go about combating that. We could go route by route covering it all, but that'd be a fruitless effort because everything I would have to say would just be repeated in later routes, leading to an extremely front-loaded and repetitive video that both you and I lose interest in around the midpoint. I could try and discombobulate everything all at once, covering every little split, but this game is like a thick tapestry, and my needle would just get stuck in it. It would again lead to an incredibly front-loaded video, but this time, nothing makes sense, and then it just ends. Melty Blood's got that Shadow the Hedgehog route structure. All in all, it has about 8 of the suckers, each with their own little spice, but not all of which are super relevant to the overall dish. Thus, I've elected to do something kinda taboo in order to prevent this video from being a confusing 4-hour- wait a second. So I've done something in order to prevent this video from being a confusing 8-hour mess. So this is what happens when you don't overlook your scripts 3 times and only do twice. Your earlier sections still have references to how the video is 2 hours long because you don't think you're going to go back in and do that much, but you are going to do that much. I'm gonna go really into the first 2 routes. I mean, really into them. Every little tick will be analyzed, and the later routes, which are honestly fun to play but not exactly conducive to the story, will be summarized with a dash of analysis when necessary. The first 2 routes are by far the most jam-packed and show off Melty at its best, so this should create for the most comfortable video watching and making experience. We'll come back at the end and put it all together for the game's conclusion. Melty Blood is a puzzle. You gotta assemble the whole picture to make sense of it. Plot threads that are glanced over on one route are usually concluded in another. It's funny like that. It's got that route structure in it. Shadow the Hedgehog TMCR. Which makes it fun to play, no doubt, but it can make it more than a little thick with its pacing and structure. You'll see what I mean as we get more into this. But for now, it's time to stop gish-galloping and actually get to it. Welcome to Meltyology 102, the story, finally. How long are we into this video? A hot summer day. Rumors have been buzzing in Masaki Town that the vampire from the previous year, that's the thing Tsukihime is about, is back and terrorizing the nightly streets. As that matter relates directly back to him, Tonoshiki, our boy despite the murdertism, is out investigating. Oh, yeah, I'm gonna rip the band-aid off now for those of you who might be waiting for it, but I'm sorry to say to you Melty-onlys or meme lovers, that Neko arc isn't in the story whatsoever. Not even a playable character to the re-release. She's in the thumbnail purely for the engagement factor, but I brought her up a few times, so it's not false advertising. Okay, let's move on. Shiki is depicted as an oddly detail-oriented person from the get-go, a good departure from his characterization in the original Suki. No more lackadaisical mosey from one thing to the next, he has a purpose and a fire in his belly. One he'll fight through anemia and the daisy summer heat to see quenched. To explain why he has anemia, Shiki almost died as a kid. An experience that let him see those funny death lines, but also left him kind of physically weak for the rest of his life. Bro is 5'5" and 120 pounds soaking wet as an almost fully grown adult. Even taking into account regional differences in Japan, that's still a little whack. As you might expect given that little factoid and, well, a whole other VN taking place before this, Shiki has been through the ringer before. something that's reflected in his tone pretty well. His observations are so methodical they reach past mundane and into bizarre. It's like he's just trying to keep his brain focused lest he collapses. He lists out the number of cars per hour, the temperature, everything down to the amount of people he saw using the railways. It all peaks when he starts comparing the people suffering under the oppressive summer heat to fish mouth breathing at the top of a dirty algae-ridden tank. It's a morbid analogy that he tries to write off as a joke, and boy if that isn't Shishi down to a T. Our boy is so intent on seeing things through that he has the tendency to drive himself half to death in the process. And at the end of it, he'll just brush it all aside as something that never even mattered. I'm unafraid to say that this Sigma male is one of the most intriguing characters the Mushroom Man has ever put to pen. In Suki, he only ever got involved in the overarching story of vampires and murders when it directly concerned someone he knew. In some routes, the serial killings don't even register in his mind despite him having the ability to stop them. Another reason he doesn't help out 100% of the time in that story, though, is, well, he has a switch that gets flipped from time to time that makes him go all... Rest in peace, Archawade. As I've said, however, he's grown from that person. Unlike last year/story, here in Melty, he gets involved from the get-go while never letting himself go. I hate that this is the analogy I thought of, but he's like that gray Hulk guy. Big ol' powers while still being all there mentally. I don't even read comics, why do I know this? Anyways, despite his avid investigation and the rumors badgering about, nothing actually seems to be happening at night. There's no police investigation going on, no traces of evidence, and it's such a loosey-goosey rumor that even the people talking about it in this intro seem to be fading in and out of existence like a mirage. The music that plays throughout all this is fittingly melancholic, and really is what ties the knot on this marriage of a scene. If I'm smart, it's the piece playing in the background right now. You know what, while we're here, let me pick up on that promise from earlier and flip out about the soundtrack real quick. Melty Blood has one of the best soundtracks I've ever heard in my life. Top 3, easy. I know I'm being a real free thinker in saying that, but I really do mean it. However, when people talk about Melty's OST, it's usually only the battle themes done by Raito. They're energetic, groovy as hell, and oh my god, man really said I'll do it myself and sang his fucking heart out for the intro. An opening so iconic, I'd put money on it being the most popular thing to come from this game, outside of, you know, this gremlin. Raito is a godlike composer, and this game would go down like 3 points on a scoring metric without his contributions. But this first game, and, you know, React by extension, does have 2 composers. One for the action part in Raito, and one for the novel section. The latter half is done by Kate, all caps, an in-house composer for Type Moon who worked on Tsukihime before this, and would go on to do the soundtrack for a little-known visual novel. Didn't really take off or do that well, really sad story actually. Fate Stay Night. Like the partnership between Type Moon and French Breath itself, I find Melty's soundtrack is only so memorable because of its marriage of styles. Raito and Kate complement each other's work way better than they had any right to, given how different they are. Tracks like the one playing right now, or the remix of the main theme of Suki, are so perfectly mellow. You can't go hard 100% of the time. My preferred way to listen to the soundtrack is with the Kate tracks mixed in. There's really only one track that I think doesn't fold super well into the mix, that being the track called Ready that usually plays before fights. Really sounds like a phoned-in generic rock track, which is sad because the rest of Kate's tracks on Melty are some of the best work he's ever done. But listen to Phantom Night or Under the Moon sometime. Perfect little ditties, the atmosphere goes off. The scene I was just talking about with Shishi only feels like he's in the middle of a bad dream because of the music supplementing the dialogue. Without it, Shishi becomes a nutcase. With it, it becomes a Midsummer's Daydream affair that he's stumbling through. I'd be amiss too if I didn't mention the backgrounds in Melty either. The one in this scene is curvy with heat waves. Reminds me of when my dad used to use the grill and you could see the air around it warp. I'll miss the photo filter backdrops from Suki. If you don't see the soul, that's your problem. but these are undoubtedly more well suited to the story Melty is telling. Even if some of them really are, oh yes, this is a visual novel background territory, if you catch my drift. Moving on, the malaise of things fading in and out sets the perfect mood to introduce a new character. One Shishi will be continually unsure about, one moment trusting implicitly, the other totally doubtful of her intentions. A girl shipped in a barrel full of intrigue and a design encapsulating that mirage-like personality and the fighting game genre as a whole. Sion, Etlam, Atlasia. Interesting to note, this is the only time a sprite appears on screen. Like, not this sprite, but a traditional VN-style character sprite. And it's to signify that Sion is probably important. More so than even our boy. Hell, she even takes front billing over him on the cover, and let's actually examine the box art real quick. It helps that Sion stands out from her co-stars visually. Makes her distinct. This is a Tsukihime game, but before that, it's a fighting game with Sion at the forefront. When I said she encapsulates the genre, I wasn't joking. In designing her, Type Moon, aka Takeuchi, the artist and savior of the company, specifically made her as a fighting game character first, with her royal purple coloring and a design that is made to look better in motion. Sion being a foreigner to the rest of the Melty cast really adds to this aspect of her design too. She can get away with looking so visually distinct because until this story, she wasn't anywhere close to the insular world of Suki. A lot of brainlets online talk smack about Melty's basic-ass looking character designs, especially when it comes to characters like Aoko, but never once has that critique been levied, at least that I've seen, towards Sion. The rest of these schmucks were designed for a visual novel, but she exists to be in this. Even the haters agree. How could they not? Just look at these animations. The fluidity of her whip attack is just stunning. Street Fighter 3 is truly in shambles. After that glowing impression from Ms Etlam, and in the midst of wondering what's going on here plot-wise, we're met with a title card, and then something fun happens. In addition to having multiple routes, Melty Blood has a split perspective between Sion and Shishi. It's never all that confusing to tell who's in the driver's seat, as the one in the lead generally takes the text box at the bottom, and those boxes come packaged with these nice little emoticons to the side of them. Something I appreciate because diegetic visual cues are always welcome, even and especially if the dialogue spells it out too. Cause these two, Shishi and Sion, very different creatures peruse around their head cases. Both got a little case of the crazies, but Shiki's mouth-gaping fish brain is glistening clean in comparison to Sion's. The second we switch to her, nothing visually is all too distinct, but everything else is different. These two live in the same world, but have vastly different experiences. The sound effect that was quietly playing with cars zooming, cicadas whirring, and people chattering gets turned up significantly. It was so in the background and insignificant earlier that I didn't feel the need to bring it up, but now it's warranted. Because when I was reading, it was just about all I could focus on. This goes along with what I was saying earlier about the music and dialogue working in tandem to create a tone neither can achieve on their own. Isolated, this is just a normal sound effect. Nothing too special, use it for some subtle ambience wherever you may please. But kick it up to 11 paired with Sion prattling on about the summer heat scorching her skin, well, it becomes something entirely different, doesn't it? I know I mention it frequently in my videos, but it can't be overstated how much sound design improves something. If you all knew how much time I spent picking out the right sounds and music for my own videos, you'd probably yell at me. Okay, no more Tangent City. We're 10 pages into this and not even to the first battle. We gotta start schmoovin'. Little did I know while writing this, it would take 5 more pages to get to the first battle. I am a very effective writer. We're shown the scene of our protagonist meeting from Sion's perspective, during which she goes all watchdogs and uses something called an Etherlight to download all of Shiki's memories regarding the vampire rumor. Remember that? It's the recirculating rumor Melty Blood is about. I've only brought it up like 3 times and we're 40 minutes in, so I felt the need to reiterate. Anywho, think of the Etherlight as a fractionally sized Ethernet cable that can enter the body through pores on the skin, and then access the nervous system like it's the internet. I know, this is an extremely heady concept, but bear with me. It will make sense by the time this video is done. I promise. Sion, in this context, is like the main server, or a web page, if you will. She's able to take in all this information and connect to so many different people. But she never actually communicates in any meaningful fashion. It's kind of a deep metaphor that has oddly only gotten more relevant in the modern age. Technology, for all its wonderment, really does isolate us. Granted, there are various socioeconomic factors playing into that as well, but on average, we can't have any real opportunities to truly talk with each other. And when we do, we often don't know how. By the way, I'm saying we, but I'm not saying I or even you do this. I'm just saying society as a whole tends to be trailing in that direction. It's not really anyone's fault. That's just the way the cookie crumbles sometimes. Anyways, Sion herself displays this elegantly when she finally talks to someone other than herself. She's awkward, believes people have a set way of being that they never deviate from, and always assumes the worst. To her, it's a foregone conclusion that Shiki will try and murk her based on the information she knows about him, even though we, as readers who know him even a little, recognize that that's not the case. Even if you hopped in with just Melty blood, you'd know this. Because we actually have spent time with Shiki and don't assume things based on what we're told, we have a totally different outlook. Sion only knows the facts, and the facts on her proverbial wiki sheet are... Nasu has a degree in human science and was terminally online himself all the way back during Melty's development. He could actually be drawing from personal experience and his own education with this. This is symbolism so deep and so on the nose with the Ethernet Etherlight naming that I legitimately have no clue if it was intentional or if I'm just looking into this way too much. You can never tell with this damn mushroom man. It should be noted this process of ether violation usually isn't even felt by the recipient. Again, fracatissimally small little thing the etherlight is. I used 3 synonyms for small back to back in that sentence. That's just how tiny it is. Using that cable, especially if she leaves it in, oh my. Sion can view whatever memories of yours she wants, can control in a small way your movements, alter memories, and if she's feeling particularly sadistic, can fry all your nerves. It basically enters you and conforms to your nervous system and brain, wrapping around them in perfect unity for flawless data collection. Any memory she views, she will experience like she's the one who did it. Everything about its design is invasive, and the kicker is, you'll only know once it's too late. Your data's already gone by the time you realize it was stolen. So basically, it's kind of like social media. How does the etherlight work? How does it become that tiny and still function? What even is it? Magic, bitch. It's a pretty cool concept, and this is the simplest way I can lay it out. The etherlight is a really small Ethernet cord. I don't know if FB got the memo about the small thing though, because I'm fairly sure Sion's whip attack is meant to be her using the etherlight. The attack is still beautiful, but that thing is the size of an actual Ethernet cord. I kinda touched on it earlier, but for clarification, she does have 2 ways of using the thing. She can either garner specific information, that's what she does when she just like taps it and takes it out, or she can leave it in someone as a permanent nanny cam if she's worried about them. At all times, getting a feed of what they feel, what they see, what they experience, basically. Okay, I know that was a lot to just kinda dump on someone, especially someone who's new to all this, but something you have to understand about Kinoku Nasu before the water of apathy towards his work consumes you is to not think about it too much. Never put more thought into something than the author did. Nasu majored in human science, and thus character interactions are his bread and butter. Nasu probably thought the etherlight was cool beans as a way of detailing Sion's character flaws and incorporated it. Same as with the mystic eyes of depth perception and Shiki, actually. To reiterate, our boy almost died at a young age and has been weakened ever since. Life to him is this fragile, fleeting thing, and him literally seeing the seams of it all plays into that. It's all just a surface level metaphor. Don't think about how it works logistically. You'll hurt your head. Of course, that's not going to stop some people, and hey, if you're into that, you're into that. I can't stand it when he goes on lore expository tangents, but that's just me. You do what you want. I'm not trying to attack anyone. I'm just a neutral third party, man. Speaking of hurting your head though, Sion really hurts hers via connecting to Shiki's Ethernet port and being flooded with
insert cash or select payment type.
Macaroni salad.
She's been looking for someone's memories to substantiate all the vampire rumors around, and she's found pretty much patient zero. Shiki and Tsukihime saw just about everything regarding that whole debacle. As such, in scanning his memories, Sion gets flooded with visions. The first she sees is one of Shiki taking on someone named Brother Nero. Spelt like this, I'm not saying that. I must have tried to say it in an earlier video made 2 years ago, but I'm sure as shit not saying it now. To be fair, the actual character canonically can't say it either, so it's fine. Anyways, Nero was a man who had that dog in him. Shiki clapped him by poking him in the side a little bit though. She then recalls the time Shiki battled with a homeless bum named Roa, an incel who lived in the basement for years and got addicted to forum culture, thought he was hot shit, and got murked his first week in the real world after failing to plow his sister. Shiki clapped him by also poking him in the side a little bit. 2 years removed from Suki, and Type Moon was already doing member berries. For a shame. Oh, Sion also sees... And because of that, she can't exactly classify Shiki as harmless, so she tracks him down and inserts her etherlight into him permanently. Not the only reason she does that though, she also obviously sees his abilities, and more importantly to her, Shiki's connection to someone named Arcoade. Remember her? Not the Neko version. No, not the Neko version. No time to follow through on any of that just yet though, because Sion then falls asleep on a cozy little trash pile and has a flashback. Sion belongs to what is known as the Atlas Institute, hence the Atlasia in her name. Pretty subtle detail, not many people notice it. You Type Mooners and F-Golits might be excited to knowledge all over me with lore right now. This isn't the same institute you know. This one is an offshoot of the Mages Association instead of its own thing. If you're wondering what the Mages Association is, it's an association of mages, keep up. Yeah, magic exists in this world and is policed so normies don't flip a lid. It's much easier to research heinous shit without governments breathing down your neck as it turns out. The MA is located in the Eurasia Africa area because of course it is, it's a fantasy setting. Funnily enough, most people from the association are really racist to the Japanese. They see the country as this far eastern backwater full of savages. Sion isn't racist, though. Nasu might be. Seriously, Sion is from Egypt. Why is she whiter than Shiki? Why is this the one time he went over Takeuchi's head and said, "Make her white"? The perfect design was already there. Look at it. It's abject perfection, and anyone who argues is just racist. Checkmate. Oh, also, as I said, Sion and Atlas are isolationists located in the deserts of Egypt. You remember what I said way earlier about collectors? Well, a haven for collector types describes the Atlas Institute perfectly. They keep their projects and findings inside a cat box the outside world isn't allowed to see, will hunt down whistleblowers, and no one really likes them because of all of it. At least, that's how I think they should react. Most people actually end up thinking, OMG, they're super cool, both in-universe and outside of it. But see, I see it for what it is. I know what's inside the cat box. It's just a bunch of mundane shit. They try to hype you up by saying there's weapons that can end the world in the Atlas Institute, and that they've already discovered the secrets of the universe. But no, it's definitely just a bunch of snooty old fucks. but no one sees it like I do, which I kinda hate because to equate it to real world stuff, it'd be like if I spent months and months working on this video, only to never release it to anyone because it's more special that way. I'll still talk about and hint about what was in it, just never release it. That'd be like really lame and all of you would berate me and yell at me for it because, well, just release the stupid thing. But you see, that is what the Atlas Institute is. To the point that even within their organization, sharing your own findings with other members is pretty frowned upon. It's not illegal, but they will look at you weird for it. Now, if you know 1 and 1 make 2 and 2 and 1 make 3, you'd have realized that Sion's whole thing of stealing others' personal information doesn't exactly jive with Atlas's mentality. Not just her though, but her family who's been with the Institute for ages and has been refining this technique for generations. It's something that'd be harmless if it never got found out, but the issue is that, well, of course it got found out. Right as Sion was the only Etlam left in the place too. Over her life, Sion was able to work her way out of disgrace, but never out of the stigma placed on her. The eyes glaring at her and berating her as she received her expected promotion is something her daydream fixates on. See though, Sion is based. Though she lived most of her life in accordance with Atlas's frilly values, eventually, she said f it and broke their cardinal rule flat out. She's researching something super special I'll talk about in a bit, and she needs all the help she can get, be it via sharing traditionally or via Etherlight. If this sounds like it's getting too heady, don't think about it too much. The Meiji people are all in this area and they do magic research. Some are more cagey than others and never learn to join the sharing circle. Sion, after living most of her life in stigma, wants to share so that she can learn more stuff, and the Meiji people don't like that very much. And that's essentially all you need to keep in mind. If you know basic geography and have been paying attention to this, your Meltyology 102 lesson, you might have noticed something peculiar. Why would someone who grew up in the deserts of Egypt feel like she's baking in the summer sun of Japan? Isn't a desert a lot hotter than a back alley? Well, congratulations. That's a special mouse tool we'll use later. Here's a few hints. First, Sion is afflicted with something that starts with a V and ends with an amperism. Second hint, the cure for her affliction is why she left to go scour the globe for research. No time to ponder what those hints mean though, because Sion stirs awake from her daydream and begins her hunt for our boy Tono. However, before heading out, she remembers her little philosophy regarding individuals known as human beings whom she has interacted with before in her life. If they wish to distance me, then I will keep them distant. I'm trying to present the knowledge in an entertaining way, but veneer off, Sion's had a pretty rough go of it. And you can tell because right away she's characterized as someone who really needs to socialize. She's gone like at least a few months without a proper conversation or shower, and you can... I'm just assuming on that last one, but you get it. She's gone like at least a few months without a proper conversation, and you can tell in her thought patterns. She constantly beats down on herself for not doing things 102% all the time. Sion tries to be extremely confident and treat her past like something that doesn't matter, but it does. After her sickly daydream, she tries to wipe the dust off her shoulder and just forget it. She recants to herself that if she was truly burdened, she wouldn't have dreamed at all. But, as with her proclamation within the recollection of, I didn't pay attention to their scornful eyes, it's a little more than grandstanding for an audience of one. Sion has these lines like, it was 8 years ago, what was correct, what was mistaken in reference to her time at Atlas. She has extremely contradictory thoughts about it depending on if it's her subconscious dream or her repressive consciousness speaking. Something can't be pointless if you keep focusing on it, which she does. Yet, she tries to ignore it whenever it pops up. When it comes to herself, Sion's in and she's out, she's up and she's down, and other lyrics from that one Katy Perry song. All this isn't even getting into how she hides her own self from others either. All in due time, though. Sion being at the center of Melty Blood is no mistake. Sion is a rich tapestry of a character, and her bashing monologues take us through the process of unweaving. We know two things for most of this initial route. She wants secure vampirism, and she's fixated on getting to the bottom of the rumor mill. More so than even her time at Atlas, she never stops to ruminate on that second one. It's like a formality, as simple as doing laundry. She doesn't think about it. Sion has gotten by for years by being this cool, calculated person. She takes everything surrounding her into account via her etherlight, forms the best course of action, and takes it. And that's how she views the whole rumor murder situation going on in Misaki, and that's at least what she tells herself about her ideology. See, much like you can get a bunch of ideas and information via your own Ethernet cable, some of which are probably not the best to act on, Sion's own etherlight and the data she collects all goes out the window the moment she touches grass. Her self-hating self-image dissolves like sugar and water when our best boy steps in and says howdy. Sion talking to Shiki is the first sign of real humility and emotion we get from her. At least, positive emotion. I don't even have to say anything, just look at the sprites we see of her before and after she meets him properly. Shiki is more or less on equal footing with her ability-wise, and is someone who's not judging her negatively on first impressions like most of the Atlas snobs probably did. Also, he's chill as despite her being hostile, so of course she can't help but let the sun in a little bit. Sion in these conversations with our boy is still her calculating, info-copying self, but she comes alive in moments where things go awry and she gets flustered. It's in her clambering to get things back on track and think on her feet that you really get to know her. She'd have you and herself believe she's got everything under control with some of the most toxic self-confidence you've ever seen, but she doesn't. She does need help. She's still got those terminally wired-in proclivities of being untrusting and uber-pragmatic, some of which do come back to bite her in later routes. But even right here, she's taking the right steps to amend that. You know, having an actual conversation with Shiki instead of mind-breaking him with her etherlight out the gate. She doesn't even know she's doing it, but her brain did. Her interacting with him doesn't mean she's soft or anything now, though. Sion wants nothing more than compliance from the boy. She wants to insert her etherlight properly when he is calmly still and monitor his every action, as he tends to be a hotbed for shit hitting the fan. Additionally, she prepares to fight her way to his compliance because she thinks Shiki will go all. Of course, Shiki stops himself from going all after sensing Sion is turning into a vampire, but still prepares to defend himself. He's not a doormat. Bro has no clue what's going on. He just wants to calm Sion down and talk to her because it's clear to him that she knows something about the vampire rumors recirculating. As Sion wants his freedom and to turn him into a cam girl, not that he realizes either of those are at stake, and Shiki wants to alleviate tensions and find out what's going on here. The two come to blows, and finally, the first fight of the game happens. Howdy y'all, post-talk Sleepy Crest here just to kind of end the video, because originally it wasn't supposed to end here. See, the Melty Blood video, as you might tell because it's 52 minutes in and we haven't even gotten to the first fight, is a really long video. As a matter of fact, the final length is 4 hours in total. However, I think my channel's gone through enough dead air to last a lifetime in recent months, so I've elected to kind of split it up and just give you all the parts as they kind of come out, just like 4 parts, each roughly an hour long, and then at the end go back and edit it all together for a final thing. I made a community post about this, but I know like 90% of you don't read those, so that's why you're seeing this now instead of like another fucking month from now as a whole video. In addition, I kinda wanna pivot away from Melty Blood because it might seem like it's been a minute. This video has been my fucking life for the past 2 months, and I just wanna make literally something else. Literally one other thing so I don't get super burnt out. Like, don't get me wrong, this video is a joy to work on. I've been loving every second of it. Oh my god, it is so overwhelming at times, and I just want to make something stupid and quick in between. But I promised the Melty Blood video would be next, and I can't takesies backsies on that. I'm just rambling at this point for no other reason than to ramble. If you're still listening at this point, hi, thank you, how are you today? The parts on YouTube will come out an hour a pop, like roughly the size of this one. However, if you are interested, On my Patreon, I upload stuff as I edit it. And there's honestly been some pretty frequent uploads on there. There's podcasts, there's writings, very, very, very occasionally, because most of the time I'm just editing videos. But yeah, that's a thing you can check out if you'd like. I'm sorry, normally I'm far more scripted for the end of the video, but hey, what can you do? This was kind of a split-second, last-minute decision when I said to myself, wow, I really want to release something, and I need to release something. Like, I don't think it's good for your YouTube channel to let it go to dead air for like a month or two, so there we go. Speaking of, please support this channel in any way you can. Like, subscribe, all that jazz. I love this stuff, and that other people love it too. Always makes my heart go a-friddle. It's not even a word, that's how intense the emotions are. Alright, this is a mess. An unadulterated, unabashed mess. It is 6 in the morning, almost 7, Jesus Christ. I am extremely tired, and I still gotta edit this into the video with like some kind of footage over it. And, you know, do one Passover, do another Passover, upload it, and then go to bed probably at like noon. So see you all soon. If you're watching this video the day it's released, or hell, even like the hour of its release, I recorded this like 4 hours ago probably, and I think that's pretty neat. Okay, I'll see you on the next part, which will probably be up a hell of a lot sooner because it's already fully written. Most of it's recorded, all that's left is just to edit it, and editing is a joy. It's great. It's annoying sometimes, but it's great, so hopefully that'll be up a lot sooner. Expect like something small in between these videos, like a quick little 10-minute project. I've had like slivers of stuff that I excised from this Melty script. I think it's like 2 or 3 just small little video ideas that I just want to package up, wrap up, and ship out there. I've actually recorded 2 of them already, but it's just a matter of like editing those and getting them out there. And I just, yeah, I don't know. Also want to take a break from Type Moon, maybe, perhaps, if you all let me. Nah, it's a joke. It's a joke. Joke-a-do. But yeah, take a break from Type Moon. I don't know what I'd take a break from it to do, probably something stupid, but I do just want to make something small in the meantime. Wow, this is a beautiful Endslate, isn't it? Can you tell I've been up for hours and hours and hours beyond what I should be? Anyways, bye for real. Take care. See you all in the next part.